Hello, beautiful friends. Greetings from Stockholm. It is a cozy December day, and I am feeling so inspired to just chat about December and this idea of closing out a year. And as we move toward the solstice and the end of another calendar year, I think this is such a beautiful time of year, but also there's all these pressures and all these energies on it. And I know we already did a December monthly reading and conversation, but this for me is so much more about just the interpersonal relationship that I have with you all and just sharing some of my rituals and routines and things that I'm thinking about as we close out this year. And these conversations are never the most popular ones. I don't get the most views. But what I love about this space and anybody who joins me for a little cozy time of reflection and honesty and humanity is that this is a really, really nice space to do that creative work in and to explore together in. And I think one of the big lessons I've learned this year is that my work, I find no joy in it when I'm just trying to chase some kind of version of YouTube success or visibility success. For me, the best I feel is when I'm creating something that feels fun, that feels joyful, that feels curious, that feels meaningful, that feels deep, any of those words. And I don't really care anymore. I just don't care. I don't care if I'm relevant. I don't care if everything I make is super popular or cool. Like, I just don't care anymore. And it's been one of the most liberating conclusions that I've come to at the end of this year. And I'm also just super appreciative of the people who do sit with me in these conversations, because I think getting to share that and have that common feel and that common longing for a deeper sense of life and mystery and softness in life, that's what I love to share with you here. So I'm really excited to just chat today. I want to go over some of my book favorites. I know many of you asked for book recommendations from me in the past, and I'm just going to do a really short one for this conversation. And then I wanted to talk about some of the ways that I am entering into this December and moving through this December for myself, for my own personal process, and like what I'm doing, because it's been such an intense year, and there's been a lot of letting go and release. So some of the ways that I'm connecting with this whole time of year in my own way, and maybe you'll want to play with that framework as well. So let's get right into it. So many of you have asked over the years for book recommendations. I think especially in the fields of tarot and astrology, if you're just getting started or you want a good recommendation that will be soothing, comforting, not overwhelming. And you know, it's an interesting field. There's a lot out there and there's a lot of noise. And I'm pretty picky about what I will pick up and read. I'm pretty picky about what I want to be, what kind of messages and framework and cosmology I want to be reading. I found I've had to create a lot of my own interpretations and work and writings, which is what I do here. But I do have a few suggestions, and I'm also going to add some books that aren't focused solely on tarot and astrology, but are focused on kind of the whole being, that I think some of you may enjoy and are some of my favorites. But let's get started with the tarot and astrology world. First recommendation I have for tarot is 78 Degrees of Wisdom. This is a fantastic book if you are just getting started in tarot. You want a really comprehensive, very soulful read. This goes through all 78 cards in a classic deck, the symbolism, the meaning. She does a really beautiful job. This is by Pollack. It's a classic and it stands the test of time. I think it does a really good job of being mystical and practical and user-friendly, and overall is a really great tool if you are looking for a really good foundation in your tarot journey and you want some soulfulness. I find this to be a really great read. I like to go back there and reference that book often in my work. Another book that I think is really fun. It's a little bit more on if you've been into astrology for a little while and you're into it and you want to add some layers, is this book I've discovered this year, Alchemy, The Soul of Astrology by Clare Martin. It's a really short book. It's only 120 pages. And it really kind of it overlays alchemy over astrology and the interconnectedness of these two fields, how the symbolism really connects. It has some different ways of exploring things like Saturn and Neptune, Mercury, really great for that. And this is just a really fun deepening of the symbolism and the magic that happens when we explore ourselves. And alchemy is all about transformation and the way that one version dissolves and gives way to a new material. And it's just a really fun and solid read. And then if you're looking for a bit more of a critical book, you can get into Post-Colonial Astrology by Alice Sparkley Catt. This book is for somebody who is looking for more of a critical look at astrology in general. And it is a little bit more academic. I will say that as somebody who has a master's degree in history, I felt very at home reading this, and I don't mean that in like a condescending way at all. It's just that like it felt very much like my years of studying colonialism and gender and race and class. It really deconstructs that. So if you're looking for something to add a little bit of edge to your astrology practices, this is going to be a great book for you. I will say that this is kind of like a critical analysis of astrology, and it won't necessarily, one of the things, this isn't really a critique as much as just a reflection on what you'll get out of this book if you're wanting to read it. You're not going to get the new frameworks to work with to move you forward in your astrology. This is going to just be more problematizing the old ways of doing things. And I think that's one thing. It's like I would pair this book with something else that helps you extend into the future and how you want to use and work with astrology in the future. But if you're looking to kind of explore the roots of some of these things like Mercury and Saturn and the Sun and how they've historically been connected with, this is a really informative and interesting read, and will definitely challenge the system and ask some deep questions. And then for books that I've read this year that have really stuck with me, one is a book that we read in our book club on my Patreon. We have a quarterly book club, and this was the first book I chose, and it's Bittersweet by Susan Cain. I have it here on my Kindle, on my e-reader. And this book is so beautiful for any of you who always have a bit of sadness and longing in your heart, which I am that person. I'm always feeling things really deeply. This book is so life-affirming, so lovely, really, really comforting, and will actually give you that kind of happiness that comes from being somebody who's bittersweet. I really highly recommend it if you're looking for a little support. Another book is Awakening of the Soul by Michael Meade. Michael Meade, I'm getting so many reflections on here. Michael Meade is, he does a lot with mythology, and you can listen to his podcast. He's written a lot of books. This one feels very personal. It's kind of talking a lot about his journey into kind of connecting with mythology and how that storytelling really helped him and shaped him and how spiritual it is. And it was a really, really profound read and very deep and meaningful. And then the final book, this is something actually I haven't read just this year. This is a book that's kind of stuck with me over the last couple of years. It came out almost 2 years ago, I think, which is Martha Beck's The Way of Integrity. This book is so wonderful. Martha Beck is such a unique spirit in the world, and I love her book. She writes very approachably and it's a very easy to read her works. I think she does a really good job of taking pretty complex concepts and making them so readable. And it's all based on Dante's Divine Comedy and how that great poem and that great masterwork is a real guide. It's really interesting, a whole new way of looking at Divine Comedy and how we move through this life. So it's a really great book, and I know many of you have already read it. It is well known. It's not a hidden gem. But those are some of the books that have really given me a lot of soul medicine over the last year, and I hope you enjoy and find some inspiration there. So it got to be December a few days ago, and I realized that I needed to take a breath and just connect with myself at the end of this profound year in my life and really think about how I want to go through this doorway of the solstice, the end of a calendar year, the opening of a new calendar year, and really be clear with myself about what I'm prioritizing and how I'm moving through that. And I thought it would be really fun to just share some of those practices, those rituals, those explorations with you, if they're anything that you feel like exploring yourself or that you can relate to, because I know whoever's hanging out here with me, you're probably also very similarly wanting to feel nourished and cared for as we close out this year and not feel like we're hustling ourselves through the last of this year, hustling ourselves into the new year, but instead feeling very connected to ourselves and connected to our own natural rhythm. So I think it'll be fun to just talk about some of these ideas and feelings that I've been moving through. The first thing I realized was that, and for those of you who are new here, if you happen to have stumbled on this video to hang out, I immigrated to Sweden at the beginning of this year, the beginning of 2022. My partner is Swedish, my husband is Swedish, and we decided to build our life here after like a 2-year immigration waiting visa process. I was able to move at the beginning of this year, and it has been a really profound year. I've had to dissolve a lot of who I was and start to build new definitions of what home and identity and safety and self-worth is, which has been so beautiful. It's also taken a lot of energy. But one of the things that I've noticed for myself this year, and it's something I know about, it's something that me and my therapist have spent time working through, is that there's been a lot of judgment for me this year, trying to keep me safe. That inner worrier, that inner guardian has been very, very busy this year. As much as I'd like to say that this year of immigration was just me like being my best like Sagittarius rising, Leo hearted self, just rolling along, being like, it'll be cool, man, everything's great. I really wasn't in that modality for a lot of this year. And this is total honesty here. I was very concerned about doing things well, doing things right, studying hard, making sure the paperwork was done. And I burnt through a lot of my fuel doing a lot of self-judgment and trying to keep myself safe. And these are old mechanisms that go way back to when I was little, right? So often those old mechanisms come up when we're going through huge waves of change. So one of the first things that I'm really thinking about as I close out this year is practicing radical non-judgment on myself. And I don't want to be giving myself a whole bunch of heavy homework to close out December or to open up January, but I do think that this one is important. And I think it's something that probably all of us need as we close out a year, because you get to the end of a year, right? And it feels like something where we need to have accomplished a certain amount of things and probably also feel like we need to know what next year is going to be and what our goals are for that, what our visions are, how are we implementing that. When we wake up on January 1st, are we going to feel like we're on task? And that part of ourselves, our culture is constantly poking at that and inflaming that part of ourselves that's worried and scared. But I think practicing that radical non-judgment just creates so much spaciousness in the season for the daydreaming, for the exploring. And also, and this is the other part of what I'm really doing in my rituals and in my reflections for this December, I am leaving a lot of space for not knowing. And it's something I talked about in the December reading. If you saw that, a lot of the things I'm talking about here are going to be directly reflected in that video as well. But I think it's kind of counterintuitive. A lot of times this time of year, we get a lot of messaging around making our new goals, right? The resolution stuff. But even if you don't use the language of resolutions, it might be a time of year where you're coming up with what you want your 2023 to be, what you want to accomplish, who you want to be, how you're going to embody this person. There's a lot of messaging that starts to bubble up around this time about how we need to get started on the new year now. But I think rather than it being about sitting down and making the vision board, which if you're feeling that, please go ahead. No problem here. But I actually think that practicing the radical non-judgment and just being like, I don't know, but I'm curious, creates enough space to actually hear what wants to come in the new year. And so for me, actually, rather than giving myself the homework of visualizing, scripting, writing out exactly what I want, especially I think in these weeks leading up to the solstice and as we move through this really dark window, I want to just be more curious and open. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not journaling, because I definitely am. And sometimes there will be those hits of insight, and that's great. And I will roll with those, and I will let myself write about those when they move through. But I prefer during December to just leave an ellipses rather than having punctuation points throughout my thoughts about myself and my story and all of that. I think for me, the time of the solstice, the time of Sagittarius into Capricorn energy is really associated with the symbolism of the hanged man, the esoteric seeker, as well as the holy fool, which goes beyond the tarot deck into this concept of the fool energy in our larger world context was often a bringer of wisdom from the contrarian point of view. And for me, that means that when we normally are girding ourselves to push forward into life and make things happen, that this is actually the time to stop doing that, to take off some of that pressure. And weirdly enough, that's when things start to move forward. And so I'm really leaning into that hangman, holy fool wisdom in this season. So I'm activating that by reflecting on images like the hanged man, thinking about how when we invert things, they become something new, we create something new. I have some questions or prompts that I'm also going to be working with as we move through this last chunk of the year and as I move into the new year as well. And these are questions I think so many of us probably already have variations on, but I'll just share them with you if they're anything that feels like it would connect with you. So the first thing is, what were the really important themes and wisdom of this year? I think it's so important at the end of a year. While I don't want to make this concept of time too all important and all consuming, I think it's so nice to really have a review of the year and to realize all the things we have learned. So much of what we have learned, the wisdom we have gained, is so incremental that while we're in it, it feels like we have made no progress. But taking some time to really acknowledge how far we've come can be really empowering and exciting and give a lot of release and relief to the year. I think another thing that's really important to explore is what makes me feel safe, whole, and present. I think so often, with this pressure of this time of year and what our goals are, it can feel very much like we need to leave ourselves. So for me, it's important to think about how I can incorporate more of those spaces that really make me feel like I'm here, present with myself, and that I'm feeling safe and I'm feeling whole and I'm feeling like I can really be myself, and how I can amplify that for myself during the season especially. How can I make space in each day for not knowing? For me, I think this is maybe the most important question of this season. I want to make sure that throughout the day, I'm having little spaces where I'm like, I don't know, and not feeling like that's a bad thing, but rather getting really curious about that not knowing and journaling about it and walking with it and stretching with it and baking with it. Wherever I may have not knowing, I want to spend more time in that space. So how can I make space for that? And then, of course, what can I let go of at the end of this year? I think it's so fun. This is one of my favorite things to do. What is done? What can I say? Oh, I let go of that. Wow, that's completed. Wow, I have finished this. That is such a rewarding and fun exercise. And finally, I think this is such a fun way to explore ourselves. What are the descriptive words or colors or feelings that I can feel bubbling up inside of myself? I like to notice the colors of my spirit that I'm feeling, maybe the feelings that I want to see grow and emanate from me in the coming year, or key words, key ideas that I feel like really connect with me. And sometimes I'll just have fun thinking about the words that would be the best at reflecting what my spirit is really trying to direct my vision toward at this time. So those are some of the questions that I'm going to be journaling on, reflecting on, walking with, stretching with, sitting with, and that's going to be a lot of what my self-care in December is going to look like, as well as the radical non-judgment. That's a big one. So I hope you enjoyed this chat. I'm actually going to be doing a 4-part series over on my Patreon to close out this year and open up the new year. So it'll be every Wednesday starting on the solstice all the way through into January. And there's going to be worksheets. I'm going to do a little chat for each of the weeks. And it's going to be a really great framework for if you're looking for a softer framework to kind of move through the doorway that is this time of year with. I would love to have you there. It's going to be such a wonderful space, and that's available to all tiers. So I'm really looking forward to putting that together and seeing you there for that. I would love to see you over on my Patreon. Of course, I love it when you're here with me. We're going to keep having these conversations, these heart to hearts, and a lot more energy is coming our way, including a Capricorn new moon very, very soon. So I'd love to see you here in this space as well as on Instagram. And yes, there is only one true Sarah Verba. So yes, there are dupes out there. Be sure to just follow the handle that I have here and in the description box. I will see you also very soon. Have a beautiful, nourishing December.